Hey, what's up, Ink fam? Okay, so I got another color piece for you guys. This one's interesting. Definitely a very custom design. My client wanted a turtle with a world championship medal sitting on top of the earth. And so it's a very custom design. I actually did use some chat GBT to kind of create this design. It took several iterations to try to get it as close as we could. And then I made my own edits in Procreate as well. Trying to change up the way it looks, make sure the sizing is right, make sure the world champion looked good, make sure that, the turtle looked pretty sick, and so this one is more of an illustrative piece than it is a realism piece. And we're going with this sort of like art, I don't know how to describe this sort of style, you know what I mean? This brush stroke sort of style that it has. So right now I already did some of the outline of the world of the planet. On the outside, I used a little bit of blue dipped into black to create that outline. I don't want solid black lines on this tattoo. Just like that turtle right now, it's I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little bit of green inside of that black that I'm doing, some of those lines. So that way I can still have a darker, more contrasted look without giving it any hard black lines. And then obviously I outlined the shape of the continents on the planet with a green. And so that way I could still have that and I'm not end up wiping away the shape of the continents as I'm tattooing. Most of the continents are going to be in a green tone, so that's why I went ahead and outlined it in a green. And right here, just doing my lining. I have this sped up a whole lot faster than the rest of the tattoo. It's pretty straightforward, doing outlines. All of these lines, like I said, I'm dipping into a black and then dipping into a color. So the ribbon for that medal, it's a blue, and so I dipped into blue and then dipped into black, and I did my outline. The world championship medal, I pre-mixed my yellow ochre an ochre from Eternal with some purple. I believe the purple was from Fusion, so that way I can get this sort of like off gray, darker sort of like color, and then that's what I'm using to do my outlines, dipped into a little bit of black. The world champion on the inside, the lettering as well, the same tone but dipped into black, so it could be darker, more bold, same deal. Like I said, I didn't want really hard black lines throughout this tattoo, so that's why I'm dipping into a color and then dipping into black, so that way when it heals, it gives it sort of like a softer black look instead of it being just like a hard outline. So right here I'm just filling out that world champion. I'm using mostly Stigma. No, for this one, I'm using Stigma needles. I like Stigma needles, 12 gauge. I actually get those on Amazon. It's so much easier for me to purchase things on Amazon. The convenience factor, I honestly can't be beat. As long as you're ordering ahead of time, you're never going to be out of supplies, right? And that's usually what I go for. This is a 7-round liner, regular 12 gauge. And then I'm just kind of like doing my outlines, shaping it out, so that way as I'm wiping, because the whole tattoo is in color, I don't want to lose my stencil. Oh, here you can kind of see, man, I wish I could figure out my camera all the way, so please have patience with the video for the focus. But I dipped into that off gray yellow ochre that I made, and I'm using that to create the lines for like the gilded sort of floral branch design that's inside of the World Championship medal. And here I'm using I believe it's a 9 curve mag. It might be it's a 9 curve mag, also Stigma 12 gauge. I dipped into my deepest blue. All of the blues that I'm using are all from Radiant. I love Radiant blues, especially with somebody with a little bit more darker complexion in their skin. You want to shoot for Radiant. It's really high pigmented, and they do show through after healing and everything. So it looks really dark, but that's a deep royal blue. It's like my deepest blue that I have. And then later on, I actually give it another pass with some black dipped into it to make it a little bit darker and a little bit more bold. So right now, I'm just finding in the design based off of my reference, what are the darkest blues, and I'm just blocking it in real quick, real fast, not being extremely perfect with it. What's cool about doing these types of tattoos where it's more illustrative, I don't have to worry too much, and I can kind of move through it a little bit more efficiently because it's artistic, it's organic, it's not, a realism piece. I'm not trying to match every single bead of sweat and every single hair, you know what I mean? So right here, I'm just kind of blocking them in, throwing some colors down. I've dipped into more of a regular royal blue now. Man, those things are so badass. I love those colors. And I'm blending into those darker blues that I laid down already, going back and forth. This is my foam dispenser. I love the foam because it does a really good job of picking up any ink that's stuck to the skin, and it doesn't wipe away the stencil too much. So whenever I'm kind of sticking to more of a dry wipe, I like to use the foam instead of using liquid, because then I can kind of wipe away just a little section and get rid of the ink that's stuck to the skin without losing too much of my stencil. And it picks up a lot of it. I think the little bubbles or the sort of like foam does a really good job of picking up the ink. Okay, and so here I'm more in that mid-tone blue now, finding those areas where I can block in that blue while simultaneously blending into the darker blues that I already laid down. I'm using the edge of, I'm using my needle a little bit more diagonal because the whole design has this sort of like wind and movement effect that's happening inside of the planet, inside of the world, where the water and the wind and the clouds are kind of like swooshing. So I'm using it back and forth in motion, sort of like a sickle shape, to create that movement and find the shapes that are in the design, And if you've been seeing any of my videos before, you know that I always run my machine on a lower setting whenever I'm doing color. I do stick my needle out a little bit more. That would be considered the throw of your needle, right? I stick my needle out a little bit further than if I was doing a black and gray shading tattoo. I want to be able to see where I'm sticking the needle in. I want to go ahead and press and push that ink into the skin ASAP, as soon as possible. And I try to be in and out as fast as I can as well. So it's simultaneously trying to punch that skin into the ink into the skin while trying not to damage the skin too much. Now I'm using a little bit of a lighter tone mixed in with my mid-tone blue. Like I said, all of these colors are from Radiant. I definitely recommend Radiant for their blue tones and some of their green tones, all their cool colors. Definitely recommend. I mean, you can see how bright those colors look, man. And it's interesting too because as I laid down this tone, although it looks very bright on top, once it's in the skin, it can seem a little bit more mid-tone, right? And so you got to be aware of that, especially depending on the complexion of the client. Here you can see some of that blending starting to happen. You can actually see the tone as it goes into the skin now. But the ink could look a little bit lighter, but then the moment you put it into the skin, it can seem a little bit darker. Well, now it's underneath a layer of skin, right? It's inside of the skin, and so there's like a little bit of skin that's kind of like sitting on top of the ink now, and you're kind of seeing it through the skin, right? It's a lot more visible when you're first tattooing it. Once the skin heals over it, it actually dulls out a little bit more. And so you got to be aware of these kinds of things. This takes practice. This takes years of tattooing and then having your client come back, or you get a chance to see the tattoo healed. You always want to ask for pictures of it healed and everything. We've skipped forward a little bit now. Most of that blue is in the skin now, and I'm liking the way it looks. Now I'm working on the greens inside of the continents. The green did take a little bit longer to press into the skin than the blue did. And sometimes green can be like that, especially the lighter greens. And that's one of those things that like you have to kind of mess around with the different companies, the different ink products, and see which company you like more, which product you like more. Some of the greens from Eternal don't feel too strong to me. They don't feel bright. Some of the greens from Fusion feel very light as well. Radiant has some good greens, but the very light green feels watery. You know, it feels more of like something you kind of like throw as a layer instead of it being a packing green. And so the main one that I'm using is Solid Ink. Solid Ink has some pretty good greens, the darker to mid-tone greens. Yet to find a good company for a very light green, and so the only way that I approach that is to just, you know, kind of punch it into the skin and press it in there, you know. Now we're working more on the turtle, laying down some of those tones. And yeah, I'm running my needle right over the black that I did. I'm trying to go quick because that black is already tattooed skin. If you give it too many passes, you can end up chewing up the skin and causing a lot of trauma. See, now I'm going back with a little bit of black dipped into my needle to like darken some things up, give it some dimension, find the shadow areas. This is what's going to give your tattoo contrast and give it life, give it dimension, give it depth, right? Like you can see that the front flipper is sitting forward in the tattoo. So actually my client here was, you know, having a hard time. It was hurting him. He was in a lot of pain. And so we ended up using a numbing spray and kind of wrapped his skin for a little bit. First, I sprayed Bactine to calm down the skin. And then I used numbing spray. I can't remember the name of it. I think it's called Inked numbing spray or Ink Culture or something like that. It can do a good job. Some people don't have the best reactions to numbing spray, but it helped him out at first. And he was able to hang in there for like another hour or so until you know, we needed to spray it again. Now that I've laid down my base green, my mid-tone to dark greens, now I'm laying down a light green and kind of blending that into and kind of overlapping some of those other greens that I did. Finding the shape, finding the tone, see how I'm overlapping a little bit. Add just a little bit of brightness. It changes the tone on some of the areas that I just tattooed. Right there, I'm using a round shader. And here I'm using a little bit more of a muted yellow. I'm dipping my regular yellow. I think this yellow is from Starbright, a Starbright yellow. I think it's canary yellow. And then I'm dipping, or it might be light yellow, but I'm dipping into a yellow ochre. Kind of dulls it just a little bit so it doesn't seem bright yellow, because this turtle doesn't have any bright yellow through it. It's got more of like a muted yellow, more of a green yellow, right? And I don't like to dip my yellow right into some green, because then it's so powerful. The green is so powerful on yellow, on most colors actually, that the yellow just becomes that next tone anyway. And so rather I used yellow ochre to change the tone of it a little bit, and it matches really well with the greens that are sitting in the turtle, you know. And obviously the round shader is a little bit more of a blunt sort of needle, and it punches the skin really hard, so you might get a little bit more bleeding. The approach you want to take with a round shader is in and out as fast as possible, right? And then once you tattoo it, let it sit, let it rest, let the skin breathe. I'm sure you've heard that before. That's what that means. You want to let it rest a little bit. What the skin will start to do is start to calm down, right? It won't be as inflamed anymore. It'll start to tighten up that top layer of skin that just got punctured, and now there's a bunch of holes all over it. It starts to tighten up that skin a little bit, and once the bleeding stops or it starts to subside, now you can go give it another pass and be able to punch some more color right into that skin that you just tattooed. And so that's the approach I take. I don't know if you saw, but I just tattooed that neck, and I saw that it was getting red right away after I gave it a pass. I'm like, you know, let me let it rest, come back to this other area, and let me start blocking in some of these greens. I'm laying down a mid-tone green, and then I'm gonna be going back and darkening it up, because I didn't want to go ahead and go right into my dark right away and then not be able to get it back, because I wanted to make sure it looked a little bit more brighter. This is the ribbon for the metal. I went ahead and already did a mid-tone blue. I went ahead and did my mid-tone red, added a little bit of dark blue and dark red to the edges, and then now I did my light blue in the middle. Okay, now I'm kind of working on the eyes, laying down like a dark brown on the edges so I can kind of create that gradient. I went ahead and used that brown in the metal. Any sort of gold design is going to have two main dark tones. It's this off gray, sort of like yellowish dark gray sort of color, which I made by mixing my dark ochre with a purple, which is the opposite of a yellow color, and that gives me that sort of dark gray tone. And I can dip that into black if I want it darker. And then the other color is brown, so there's always some sort of brown inside of it, like a gold. And using those two tones, you can kind of find and create that sort of gold look in anything that's supposed to look, gold metal. Adding some of those light tones in the turtle shell, finding the highlight areas. The neck was hard. The neck was actually really hard to get it to look the way that the design looked. Because there were so many different tones happening, and it was also a shadow area at the same time. There was highlights and shadows happening, and so I would go into the neck and then kind of leave it, and then go back to it. I would focus on other stuff that I knew what to put down and felt confident with, and then I kind of kept it moving, right? So that way I can move on the tattoo and not also cause a lot of trauma to the neck area for the turtle. So here I'm like going back into a little bit of the neck, and I'm like, okay, I see some shadows that I need to put down. Cool. I went and did a darker gray, it's darker green. Went ahead and put that down, finding those shadow tones, building them out, using the round shader. The round shader, I could be a little bit more detailed than a mag, for like these little small shapes. Constantly dipping back and forth, trying to find the right tones. Now, instead of a dark green, I'm using sort of like a mid-dark green, and then went back to dark, went and dipped into some black to really make some parts stand out under the chin area. And what's cool too, I don't know if you see that, but I'm doing some dark tones and wiping away right above some of that blue that I just laid down with my machine running low, and with letting the skin settle for a bit before doing some dark tones. You could wipe dark tones over light tones, not white, all day long. Once you let that skin rest and really let it soak into the skin, and then that top layer of skin tightens up a little bit, you're good at that point. You can kind of wipe any sort of tone over it. The two main culprits that you're always going to run into issues with wiping over is usually yellow and white. But other than that, most of the other light tones, you can kind of wipe any sort of color over it after you've let the skin rest. If you let that skin rest, man, you're going to be solid. You can just keep running any sort of ink and you'll be fine. So here I've almost built out the full shape of the head now with the green tones. And then pretty sure next I'm going to be using some of that yellow that's throughout the turtle. Oh, here we go. Yep, that's that yellow ochre mixed in with that canary yellow. Finding those shapes, creating the highlights, filling out the rest of the turtle head. This is a fun one, man. I like the little turtle, man. It's cool. I guess this was a tribute to a mentor and a coach for him. He is a jiu-jitsu instructor and coach, and his mentor, I believe the nickname was Turtle, and she was a world champion. She won a lot of her tournaments and went on to do big things, and has recently moved on and went on to a new venture, and so has left him holding up the mantle at their dojo, and so he had wanted to get a tribute for his mentor, and I think this is a really cool design, man, and he loved it. I don't get to do a lot of this kind of stuff, so I was excited. This metal part right here was a little bit harder to create. At this point, his skin was a little inflamed, and he was having a hard time with it as well, pain wise. And I was just trying to find the right tones, that's where it got a little bit tough to find the right tones. That eye I had dipped into my yellow ochre and to a little bit of orange, and then now I'm using regular brown, I think with a little bit of red in it, to create the gradient. And you see how fast his skin is bleeding, how fast it's like getting irritated. And so at this point, I kind of wanted to speed up a little bit, but not obviously not to the detriment of the tattoo. And so here I'm adding some of those white tones now. Adding the white in all the highlighted bits of the metal, adding the white in the eyes and some of the parts that are in light for the turtle. I think I'm using my 9-round shader here as well. And I do believe in some areas I switched over to a 7-liner, a fresh 7-liner. Oh, I almost forgot this light blue on the very edge of the planet. It's like a sort of like a bouncing light that's happening. So I went and headed through a light blue at the very end here on the edge of the whole planet. Man, he was hurting. He kept like, give me a sec. He was having a hard time with it, but I mean, he toughed it out. He really stuck through this whole tattoo. It's a lot, man. It's a lot of pain right there on that shin area. It's pretty rough. Me personally, I believe that the legs is one of the most painful. For myself, I've tattooed plenty of people on the legs, and they usually do really well. Most people don't, jump around and scream on the legs. Me personally, and I guess my client here, we had a hard time getting tattooed on our legs. Oh no, I actually still had some white to add in the planet. And here I noticed that I had a bunch of blue still hanging out in my napkin and on my gloves, so I wanted to make sure to clean everything up before I ended up muddying up my white. I'm using a brand new, I think an 11 curve mag, or it might be a 9 curve mag. And I'm using the edge of it diagonally, really pressing that skin, pushing that white ink into there. Haven't changed my voltage, haven't changed my speed. Hey, yeah, you could see that he's like, give me a sec, And all of those negative bits that I left open, I went ahead, I wanted them to be white, you know what I mean? So I left them open so that way we can fill up with white at the very end. And you just got to trust the process, you know what I mean? Sometimes when you're going through these kinds of tattoos or anything that's color, I believe, you're kind of like laying down your midtones and you're like, shit, I don't know if it's looking the way that it's supposed to, you know what I mean? But so long as you take it step by step, moment by moment, you're not tattooing, a full scale tattoo. You're tattooing a, cloud. You're tattooing a continent. You're tattooing a flipper now. Now you're tattooing the nose of the turtle. And so you take it moment by moment, chunk it up into little sections, and the feeling of overwhelm will start to dissipate, and you can just focus on one section at a time. And in that sense, you'll be able to finish any big, large scale tattoo a lot easier, a lot more comfortable with less stress, This was a fun one, man. Can't wait for you to check it out. Make sure to like and subscribe if you want more content like this.